So Matt Farah and I just got back from Pebble Beach on Monterey Car Week, and we saw a bunch of cars get sold, both really, really expensive and not so expensive. And we want to talk about some of the trends in the collector car market, and that's today on After Drive.
I'm going to say something right now. We got to do a show called After Drive. And it's a show about cars.
I'm just glad that we don't have to get in the car.
We're not driving. It's after driving.
It is after driving.
It's after. Well, actually, that is very true.
We took a drive, and this is after it.
Yeah, this is a real live after drive where we drove a really long way, and now we're here.
Now it's
after that, right? Both of us being fairly tired at this point.
Yeah, and we're in our half-decorated office.
Yeah, this is the Smoking Tire office. So, so where we drove back from was Monterey Car Week, right?
Yeah.
Which is the major car week of the year. It's like an entire week. If you
How
hadn't
many
known,
days is it, though?
it's 7 days of car information. No,
it should be 4. The last 2, you are over it.
Right. So it's Monterey basically shuts down to everybody but car people for an entire 7-day period.
Yeah, the locals are nowhere to be seen.
They just, I don't know where they go. They just go on vacation.
Yeah.
So from Monday through Sunday, there are like car events every single day, like auctions and shows, and it all leads up to the Pebble Beach Concours de Elegance at Pebble Beach on Sunday, which was yesterday while we're shooting this.
Yeah.
And that's like where the cars, sort of the best, most expensive, most rare collector cars go to be judged, basically. By Dan Neal, by automotive journalist Dan Neal.
Yeah. No, the Concours itself is cool, I guess, because it's so, over the top and snooty.
Right.
And, but if you've been there since Wednesday, you kind of don't care anymore.
I know. I mean, we got there in the beginning of the week, and basically it's the RM auction, the Gooding auction, the Bonhams auction. I mean, they, major auctions
every night.
Yeah, every single night.
Tens of millions of dollars of cars every night.
That's the thing. And I think for the entire week, the whole thing, all the auctions pull in like almost $500 million
it's crazy.
Dollars in cars.
Well, they take 10% of every sale.
Oh,
so
God.
just if we're talking about the Bonhams, Ferrari GTO,
right,
crashed twice.
Right.
So here's how valuable a Ferrari GTO is. You can crash one twice and someone can die in it, and it becomes the most expensive car ever sold at auction.
Right. So at the the first big auction at Bonhams, that car went for $38 million.
Yeah.
Which for some people was a disappointment, right? Because
that's crazy, right?
Yeah, because the only one before that, I guess was last year or something. It was sold for $52 million privately. We don't really know. I mean, it's sort of not speculation, but it's like people talk. There's not full transparency. We don't really know how much that car went for, whether it was $52 million or not. But we do know that this one went for 38, which is the highest auction price for a car ever.
And there was also, Steve McQueen's Ferrari. Was it like $11 or $12 million? I saw a 250 GT short wheelbase go for 8.
Yeah.
Another one was a no sell at 10. There was also a couple big tanks. I mean, a couple for all the huge spending and all that. The Ferrari
Sherman?
Triposto.
Oh, yeah. All right. Sorry.
The Ferrari concept car with a seating pattern like the McLaren F1. They said was going to go for 25. It was a no sell at 22. It didn't hit reserve. The GT short wheelbase didn't hit reserve at 10. A Shelby Cobra VIN number 5, CSX005, was a no sell at 1.7. And so there were a couple like big title cars that just did not bring. So a GTO is still going to be a GTO is 4 times as expensive as its next closest sibling, which is a GT short wheelbase.
Yeah.
That's the next closest car, and it's still 4 times the price.
Right. And that's, by the way, with without any Japanese buyers and probably
Right.
Chinese buyers, because the karma, of having a guy who died in it.
Yeah.
It's probably there.
Like the dead rapper Murcielago.
Yes.
Yeah, you don't.
That's-
That car probably would not go to China.
Probably not.
No.
But but with all that, I think some people are saying that it was a disappointing year because it.
I think it was that our expectations were managed poorly.
Okay.
I think reserves were set too high on a lot of these cars. I think there were cars that should have sold. I mean, for all our exacerbating about, oh my God, Sunbeam Tiger for $210,000 and
Right.
and two Countachs for $1 million a pop. I saw a Dino go for $700,000.
Right.
I mean, there's still big number. Everything is coming up, but I think that people who are saying a Cobra is all of a sudden is worth as much as a Ferrari 250.
Right.
I think that's not happening. I think there's people who are just coming up with these figures for what something should be worth. They're kind of talking out of their ass a little bit.
And a lot of people are saying that there might be a bubble right here. And from what you were
Yeah.
talking about, that could be one of the symptoms of a bubble, right? When you
could
see
be.
a 65 Porsche 911, a great one, a real
Yeah.
minty one, but
Yeah.
going for $280,000.
Yeah.
Or a Ponton, or not a Ponton, it was a Pagoda Mercedes.
The Pagoda SLs, or I don't know what's happening.
Yeah, and
That's
that went
crazy.
for how much? About 280 also?
I saw multiples in the 200s and then one in
Right.
the high 100s. And
So-
then XKEs as well well, XKEs are coming up slowly, but the really special XKEs are taking off.
Well,
And-
that's kind of the same with the other ones. So like the best of the best
Yeah.
are ridiculous money.
And that's sort of the thing about Pebble is like, if this XKE sells for $400,000, does it lift the market? Yes, but it certainly is not a price that all XKE. I mean, I saw right next to it, I saw another XKE. It was a no sell at 75.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So it's one of those things where it's like, if you wanted to buy one of these things to drive it, go somewhere else. Pebble, all these auctions at Pebble are for the perfect option packages, the perfect restoration, the perfect condition, or a barn find.
Right.
And so it's like, not only would a 250 Ferrari Lusso be an incredible thing, no matter which one you had, the ones that go there have the story behind it. They have the Ferrari, maybe they have the Classic K certification or blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
The stuff that is, when taken all together, really does bring up the value.
They're the ones that are setting like the specific gravity of
Yeah,
that
yeah,
model,
yeah.
right? So like, but they are, ultimately, they do sort of bring up the
they
low
do.
ones somewhat.
They do.
Yeah.
They do, but it's not like if one top tier car goes for huge money, it doesn't triple the value of the ones at the bottom.
Right.
It increases the value by 20% maybe.
Exactly.
You know?
And that's what we're seeing in the 911 market, right?
Yeah.
An
An SC is still a pretty cheap car.
Right.
It's not like because the 1965, factory demonstrator 911
Right,
went
with
for
10,000 miles on
400.
it, right.
Yeah. And that doesn't mean your SC is now an ultra rare collector's item.
Right.
There are still plenty of 911s that are not very special.
Right, but a lot of those went from 12 to 25 in the last couple of years.
that's
so
true. You can, if you watch where the trends are going, and you look at what's next, if it's, it's when these people who had the poster cars are now adults. That's when the market catches up. So, the next big stuff to go is going to be that 70s stuff, the Pagoda SLs, obviously, but maybe start thinking about BMW 635 CSIs, really fresh, shark nose BMWs, 2002s.
Right.
And then, of course, I think that now that the early versions of our supercars, the early 911s, the early Ferraris, the early Lamborghinis, are all well without of reach of anybody, I think the next thing to go is going to be the early versions of our touring cars, the AMG Hammers, early BMW M cars, the E30s and E28 M5s, the early the Audi Sport Quattros are already pretty expensive, but I think that all of those Sport Quattros are going to come up very soon.
that's really good. Actually, those are the cars that the sort of 30s and 40s and maybe early 50s year olds had. And so,
yeah.
as they go into their
and
peak
it's not
earning
going to
years.
be all of them. It's going to be the nice ones.
It's the best one you can get.
Yeah,
right, exactly.
the
I mean,
nice
if you could find an Quattro that's the
Yeah.
best one, that'll be the $280,000 one. And probably not right now,
and
but
stuff like
over
I
the
think
course of the next year.
RS2, Audi,
Yeah,
you
yeah,
know,
yeah,
and,
exactly.
and
Well,
anything.
yeah, all that really rare stuff that you can't get, but also what we're seeing this year is Japanese too.
Yeah.
So, you know, the Toyota 2000 GT went last year for the first time at $1 million. This year, two of them went for $1 million, a right-hand drive for $950,000, but over $1 million with the fees and all that stuff.
They have there was a
and the
72 Skyline. It's interesting. They don't come up for sale very often in the U.S. You can import them legally. They're older than 25, so there are companies that do import them. They're rare. They're collectible. This one, the experts told me, was about a 7.5 out of 10 in terms of how really nice it was. It presented well. It was clean. The early estimates said 125 to 150,000, but as we sat in the auction room and people started to come in, and so at first I thought maybe no one will notice and maybe the car will tank, and then it skyrocketed up to what it sold for, which was $220,000.
It sold for $220 with the fees. It was like $242.
$242.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting to see a car like that that's basically a unicorn in America.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, even though there weren't that many made. I think there were 1,000, something like that.
Yeah, it's a pretty rare car.
Yeah.
It isn't an only rare car because it's not in America. It's rare in Japan too.
Right.
It's definitely a collector car in Japan.
Oh, totally. And the other thing is though that even though it's a 72, the demographic for it is kind of young.
Yes,
because
it's
of
not.
Gran Turismo.
It's not like only people who grew up and had those things in high school want them. It's anyone who knows what a Skyline is and is interested in that sort of lineage, especially Americans who still see them as sort of forbidden fruit, are really kind of into that. And everyone who was bidding on it, from I could tell, was American.
Right.
It seemed like that was and
But it's like a halo in the JDM market in America. So
I think we will see more Japanese cars coming over for these types of auctions. I mean, I think those really special early Zs that had the Skyline drivetrain in them.
Yes. The Fairlady
432,
something like that.
Someone's gonna hang me for that one.
Well,
it's the
I mean,
432 or it's some special edition Z.
Right. With the twin
yeah,
cam.
and we're gonna see the top performing versions of Datsuns and stuff like that. And maybe they won't bring huge dollars, but I think they will start to trickle their way into the auctions for sure.
Yeah, I mean it's because Japanese cars tended to not have been included among like the Ferraris and the BMWs.
Well, they
and the
didn't really do much in
Right.
the 60s. I mean, other than your Honda S600 and S800s, and other than the 2000 GT.
Well, the 2000 GT.
There wasn't really much going on with those cars in terms of collectability.
Yeah, I mean the 2000 GT. There's no analog. I mean it's a halo car, and like the next most expensive car was like.
Well, there were 3 of them at Pebble, and there's 350 cars produced. 50 of them left-hand drive, and we saw there was 1 right-hand drive and 2 left-hand drives cars for sale.
Right.
The right-hand drives cars went for $900,000, and the left-hand drives were like 2.1 or no, 1.25.
Yeah, well, one went for 1.15. Yeah, and that was actually exactly the same number it went for last year.
So the right-hand drive one stalled at just under $1 million. So I think that $1 million barrier is the difference between right-hand drive and left-hand drive.
Exactly.
What I think is really interesting is I'm wondering what is going to happen to this pre-war stuff and the brass era stuff.
Right.
Because that stuff is still valuable. I mean, but we went to the auction and a 1926 Rolls Royce with a custom body, spectacularly presented, went for $260,000. And then right after it, it was very nice, but it was an average for Pebble Beach. Ferrari, a 365 G, like a 2+2.
Right.
It was sort of. Oh no, it was a 400 2+2 or so. I'm getting the numbers wrong. It was a 360. I believe it was a 365 GT 2+2. Which is the 2+2s in terms of Ferraris. They're a third of the 2-seaters. So went for triple the price of that.
I know.
And so,
well, it's interesting because a few years ago, maybe 10 years ago, the top Duesenbergs were the highest grossing cars there. I mean, that was like, the Duesenberg J with the the right coachworks on it. I mean, that was like the the top car.
And those cars are amazing. They were all over there was a Duesenberg class at Pebble
Yeah.
Beach, and so they were beautiful, beautiful cars.
Right. And then there was that era of the muscle car, the Hemi Cuda that went for $1 million and then blew the market up.
The second it hit $1 million, everyone's like, "What are we doing?"
Right. And then the age of the Ferraris kind of happened.
Yeah.
Where like all the Ferraris started going through the roof.
I mean, but I can't, a racing Ferrari from the 60s will always be cool forever. It's not like not like the muscle cars where people realize these things were built pretty crap. That $1 million Cuda still had that lacquer dash. You know what I mean? It's not like
I mean, that's a lot of nostalgia in with the rarity of the car.
Right. But more nostalgia than actual provenance.
Right.
You know what I mean? It didn't win Le Mans. Phil Hill didn't race a Cuda at Le Mans to overall victory. You know what I mean? So
unless
old
victory
Ferrari,
was
he probably got that. I'd be honest.
well, that's
All because I was there and I did it.
so.
But so to circle back.
Yeah.
I wonder who will pick up the torch, if anyone, of the brass era pre-war and even sort of post-war, but that really old stuff that looks great in a museum, that looks great at Pebble Beach, but that I'm not here going, I'd really like to have the keys and drive that.
Well, do you know what speaking of drive, drives that home is that the car that won Best in Show was a post-war car. It was a Ferrari from 1954.
Did you see it up close?
It's gorgeous.
It was amazing.
Yeah.
It was
a
really good.
Scaglietti, right?
Yeah, and if you just look at a picture of it, you go, okay, well, it looks like a coach-built Ferrari, but it looks like a coach-built Ferrari from about 10 years later than it really was.
Right.
You look at it and it looks much more. It has much more stylistically in common with the Ferraris from the 60s than if you look at any of the ones from the early 50s. I think those cars are really ugly. The early 50s Ferraris are nasty looking.
Well, that's right. I mean, that's true. That was the car that set the pick for the cars that were going to be coming up. And that's why
Spinelli also did the 250 TR just after that. And so this was sort of a pre-TR kind of styling exercise. And a lot of those styling bits made it to the TRs.
Yeah. I mean, that makes it a really important car anyway. But also, for the guys who judge Pebble Beach to pick that instead of like, a Duesenberg or something from the pre-war era, which was always the time, those were the cars that got all the attention. So I think it's a really big deal, and it goes exactly to what you were saying about later.
I mean, time is moving away from those cars, and I think people's tastes, I hate to say it, are moving away from those cars. I think, and I think when the owners of those cars die in the next 15 years, it's going to be interesting to see what happens to those cars, who buys them, how much they pay, and who takes care of them.
Yeah, I mean, if the children want to sell them, and if all the kids want to sell at the same time,
I know it's done.
It's bad.
And if the kids inherit it, they might have to sell it just to cover the state taxes.
Oh, that's true.
And so you're going to see a whole bunch of, really awesome French stuff that you can buy really cheap. I mean,
That's
if you
like
tell me I can buy a Delahaye for 150 grand in 15 years, like I'm going to start saving right now, because the French were crazy and their cars are awesome.
Yeah, well, that's another thing. I mean, there are some, even though like the fashion of them may be out, but there's some incredible work that they did back then.
The French are crazy.
All right, so what does all that mean for the future? So looking at the sales that happened today or this past week, what does that mean for cars being sold this year and even up to next year in Pebble?
Well, I mean, anything that has a real connection to motorsport is going to be going up. Right. Anything that is the top performing version of any car, anything that is, any super low production. I mean, anything low production is going to be great. BMW 1Ms and Ford GTs and Aston Martin Vanquishes and stuff that there just aren't very many of. Yeah. And so
then the mintiest of the minty of those.
Yeah, the best versions of those. I mean, some trashed out E30, that is an M3 but has 300,000 miles and is full of mods, is not a collector car. Now, you could buy it and you could restore it if you wanted to turn it into that, but in terms of collector cars, it's the best of the best.
Yeah.
It has to be, in the case of the Jaguar E-Type, an early model with these 3 special options. So it's the flat floor before they did the footwell cutouts, welded hood louvers as opposed to punch louvers, and exterior bonnet latches. These are 3 very dumb things that have nothing to do with the car as a whole or how it drives or anything like that. Okay, and none of them worked well. That's why they changed them all. But there's a few cars that are in the beginning in 61 and 62 that have those three things, and that will make that car worth triple what any other E-Type is worth, even if you get in them and drive them, and they're fundamentally exactly the same thing.
Right. It's like if you collect pennies, the one that has the stamp, the D is all screwed up like that. Those are the ones that.
And the other thing is mileage. A lot of people who have collector cars are worried about mileage, but I have book after book from these auctions. None of them mention mileage.
Yeah.
And in fact, if you want to talk about mileage, there was a very high mileage Mercedes 300 SL Gullwing that the guy bought new and put a ton of miles on, and it was unrestored and beat up, but he said it ran great, and it went for $1.9 million.
I know.
The most expensive SL sold all weekend.
It's amazing. The Gullwing stuff is amazing.
So if you buy the right car, mileage is irrelevant at this point. At that level, if it has the right story, if it has the right provenance, the right history, you can drive the car, you can put miles on the car, and no one will care.
Right. So cars we're going to see probably next year is probably more Gullwings, more.
I think we're going to start seeing stuff into the 80s. We saw a BMW M1.
Yeah, that's right.
And we got the Vector.
Oh, the Vector, that's right.
I was excited for the Vector. I know. So the Vector had a pre-auction. It was a WA twin turbo. It was red. It was actually the car used in the movie Rising Sun with Wesley Snipes. And Sean
That's a
Connery.
weird car. I mean,
it's a weird movie, by the way. It's a really weird movie.
But it's like a 3-speed automatic.
It's a terror. I mean, I went to the RM preview and got up and close, and you can poke around them at the auction previews. It's not open to the public, but if you go in, you can kick tires a little bit. And I poked around the Vector, and it is an apocalyptic piece of I mean, it's like you can't even believe that someone attempted to sell that thing for $400,000.
And yet the Vector means something to a lot of people from that era.
It's just so wild.
Because it went. How much did it go for?
Well, pre-auction estimate was $350 to $450. It went for $250.
Oh,
so
it didn't even
tanked a bit.
Yeah.
No, it sold. It sold for $250. It had no reserve, but it did tank. And I mean, I think that there's two ways a car is going to appreciate in value. One is if it drives terrible, but it's so beautiful and enough time has passed that no one cares.
That's right, yeah.
Which is what a lot of people are saying about Ferrari Daytonas. Everyone I talked to who had a Ferrari Daytona told me it drove like a truck. And yet Daytonas are going for $1 million now.
Right.
So because they're so cool looking and they have a V12 and so no one cares, Yeah. But the Vector, I think, is not a very good looking, not a very well built, not a very good driving car. It's just a rare oddity.
Right. But you have to really wish it was the 80s again to buy it.
Yeah, I mean, I have a DeLorean and I don't want a Vector.
So, all right, one last question. If you could buy any car tomorrow and bring it to Pebble Beach to one of the auctions next year, what would you buy?
My 1 year investment? My
1 year investment.
1 year flip?
Yep.
Oof. At any price?
Any price.
Oof.
I
okay,
know.
If you have an answer, I'd like to hear that.
I would say Gullwing. I think the Gullwings are still gonna go.
I think they look better they look a lot better than the Ferraris that are the early '50s Ferraris.
Yeah, I got another one, BMW 507, but but that thing is already high up.
Yeah,
it's in the 2s, but I think that's gonna go further.
You know what was great? There was a Bentley Continental, like the '52, like the first Bentley Continental.
Right.
Crazy.
Yeah.
Crazy.
Those were great.
Yeah. What would I bring if I could bring one car? Oh man, it would be tough.
Oh, fire truck.
Fire truck. Ambulance.
Ambulance.
What car do I think I could make the most money on a 1 year flip?
Yeah. We should actually do a fantasy.
Fantasy flipping?
Yeah, fantasy flipping.
Fantasy car flipping? Okay. A 1 year flip, I think a really good, really clean Pantera.
Oh.
You could probably do. I think Panteras are in a place that are good now. You could probably get any of the GM Motorama stuff if you could find some of that.
Yeah, that's high, but it's still. I think that's stuff it's going to go too. I think.
You know what? I would buy a Lamborghini Countach 5000S. With flares and a wing and the right color. You know, given that we saw the 79 Countach go for 950 grand, we
That
saw
was
the
a surprise.
Periscopa Countach go for 1.7 million.
Right. But the 79 was a surprise. A 400S,
It was a surprise. It's a surprise if you don't know the details.
That's
if
true.
you know the details, it's not a surprise at all.
Yeah.
That car it was a 1979 Lamborghini Countach 400S.
Right.
Never registered. Zero owner car.
Yeah.
And it has 800 kilometers on it. I mean, literally a time capsule of a perfect Countach.
Right.
And in person, it was painted a special color called like copper. It was a
beautiful
copper.
color,
It was amazing. Now, in all fairness, the guy who bought that car for $950,000 bought a sculpture.
Right.
The car did not run. They pushed
pushed
it on
it
the
out,
auction block. They didn't start it and drive it up. It didn't. I don't even think you could start it without a full engine rebuild.
Right.
But he bought the world's only zero owner Countach.
Right.
And so that's what you get.
And that's where that money came
Yeah,
from.
that's
It's
why.
that
So
kind
it's
of
not
stuff, the top stuff.
If all you see is on the Twitter blurb,
yeah.
Countach goes for 950, you go, what is the world coming to? And it's like, no, this one crazy unicorn Countach went for 950.
Right.
And I think, and the rest of them move up incrementally.
Right. Exactly.
Now, there was a time 3 years ago when you could have got a Countach for 85 grand.
Yeah.
And now a good one, the anniversary edition went for 325. That's crazy.
That's amazing. But also Lamborghini seeing the whole
Yeah.
thing. So it's like the Italians are all moving up. And
The rising price of Ferrari pulls up Lamborghini, which pulls up
That's-
Maserati.
exactly.
So if you can get in, I saw an Alpha GTA go for $275,000.
Yeah.
Getting in on a GTV right now or a GT Junior is a great buy. You know, one of those early touring cars. Getting on like a Lancia Fulvia or a Delta Integrale. I mean, anything Group B.
oh, because there was that Stratos that went for 600. So yeah, I think probably the next one would be the Integrale to get.
So
But
I mean,
anyway.
there's a lot of exciting things happening and I know this is not a relatable topic for our fans that don't have millions of dollars, but it's an interesting topic because it predicts the rest of the market. And when you're at Pebble Beach, you sort of have to suspend disbelief and play with big numbers for a little while.
Exactly, and it's just fun.
Yeah,
It's what
cool.
you do on the ride back in Matt Farah's DeLorean.
This was seriously. We did this for 6 hours in the DeLorean on the way home today, and so we thought we would record it.
Cool, Matt Farah, thanks for coming in. Or actually, thanks
you
me
for coming in.
to
You're
your
in my
place.
office.
That's right.
See you guys next time.
See ya.